Number 1. In 2015, the body of 18-year-old Joshua Maddux was discovered in the chimney of a cabin only 2 blocks away from his father's house in Woodland Park, Colorado. The poor boy had been missing since 2008. He told his dad he was going for a walk, but never returned home. By all accounts, he was an intelligent and funny young man. Officially, his death was ruled as an accident. Joshua had just been trying to get inside the cabin through the chimney, and somehow became stuck in the shaft. Unable to dislodge himself, he slowly perished inside his makeshift tomb. According to the cabin's owner, the place had been abandoned for the past 10 years. Every now and again, the owner would come back to check on the place, and said that he did notice a rancid smell. He assumed it was coming from some dead rats, but figured that they couldn't be inside the chimney because there was a large piece of furniture in front of the fireplace, impossible for any rats to get through. Josh's body was only discovered while the cabin was being demolished. His corpse was in the fetal position. Strangely, the only clothing that Josh was wearing when he was found was a ribbed thermal shirt. He was completely naked from the waist down. No shoes, no underwear, no pants, nothing. If Josh had decided to sneak into the cabin that night by climbing down the chimney, are we supposed to believe he did so while only wearing a shirt? This doesn't seem very likely at all. The owner of the cabin himself stated that he had metal bars installed at the top of the chimney to stop animals from crawling down it. If these bars could keep small creatures from being able to get inside the chimney, they would have made it effectively impossible for Joshua to do so from the outside. It seems pretty obvious that he was already inside the cabin when he crawled into the tight fireplace and became trapped. But as we know, the entrance was blocked by the heavy furniture that trapped Josh inside. You see the problem here, right? Something doesn't quite add up. The missing piece of the puzzle may just be a man called Andrew Richard Newman. A guy who knew Josh, and who may well have been with him the night he went missing. One person who knew Andy, and who also suspects that he had something to do with Josh's death, decided to leave a post about the case, and his opinions on the whole thing. This was his post in its entirety. I went to high school with this skinny, dorky hippie named Andy, who played guitar in a band. I was never good friends with him or anything, but a year or so after I graduated, one of my good friends, Josh, started hanging out with him and then went missing. Last I heard, Andy was telling another friend, "Yeah, me and Josh have been spending a lot of time together. We're planning a trip to New Mexico." Didn't really think anything of it until somebody showed me these articles. Turns out that in addition to becoming a lot scarier looking, Andy had indeed headed down to New Mexico, where he found himself shooting the shit with the caretaker of a disabled guy and got invited over to their apartment. The caretaker gets in the shower, and when he comes back out, the disabled guy is stabbed to death, and Andy's gone. When Andy got arrested, he also claimed to have killed a woman in Taos and stuffed her body in a barrel. The cops had indeed found a woman stuffed in a barrel in Taos, but already had somebody in custody for it, and decided to stick with that guy instead. Years later, I found out that the caretaker had died in a bar fight, and without him, the cops didn't have much in the way of evidence somehow, so that case against Andy was dropped too. Several of us went to the cops, saying something to the effect of, "Yo, Josh who went missing was last seen with Andy, who's a murderer. Maybe you should check that out?" Despite a fair amount of pestering, nothing really ever came of it. And by nothing, I mean the police mostly didn't even return our calls, and once accidentally cancelled the bulletin on Josh, saying that he was alive and well and living in the next town over. He wasn't. He was actually in the chimney of an abandoned cabin 2 blocks from his parents' house. The coroner said that the body had been there for about 7 years, and ruled the death accidental, concluding that Josh had probably climbed down the chimney in an attempt to break into the house and got stuck. given the age of the corpse, that doesn't seem overtly ridiculous. Except for the fact that in addition to Josh having last been seen with Andy immediately before his stabbing spree, people called in to report having heard rumours that Andy was bragging about having, quote-unquote, put Josh in a hole, and the fact that the owner of the cabin says it would have been impossible to access the chimney from above because he'd installed a heavy steel grate under the top layer of bricks to keep out raccoons and whatnot, or the fact that somebody had ripped heavy bars off the wall in the kitchen and propped it against the fireplace, or the fact that Josh's stuff was already inside the cabin, or the fact that when he was found, Josh's knees were above his head, which means to me like he would have had to go in head first. Or maybe the fact that Josh was barefoot and naked from the waist down. This is just my opinion, but I don't care who you are. You don't try and climb headfirst into a chimney via a hole in a metal grate with your dick hanging out. But the most ridiculous part of all of this for me is this quote from the coroner. He said, "I know it's not a natural death, and I'm confident it's not a suicide. My other options are an accidental death, homicide, and undetermined cause of death. It's frustrating we can't pin it down." So, your options are accidental, homicide, and undetermined, but you just can't seem to pin it down. You're telling me it's almost as though you are unable to determine the cause of death? Well, in that case, everybody knows that accidental is the way to go. Look, I get that they didn't find enough evidence to arrest Andy or anyone else, but these motherfuckers went ahead and demolished the cabin despite all of this. Josh's body was cremated. As far as I can tell, nobody even bothered to call Andy to ask if he knew anything. By the way, from what I hear, Andy's still out and about doing his thing when he's not in the mental hospital. It's not that I want somebody to blame. I'm not trying to throw a tantrum because gimme answers. All I'm saying is this. I wish they would have done some police shit. Open an investigation. Try to track down some leads. Interview some folks who've been calling in tips for the last 7 years. Maybe check for semen or something. I don't know. Don't just say accidental. Dust off your hands and call it a day. Anywho, sorry for the rant, guys. Had a little whiskey. Felt like I had to vent. But yeah, that shit frustrates me. So, there you have it. Either Joshua's death was the result of a terrible accident, or foul play was involved, with the only possible culprit being Andy Richard Newman, a man with a slew of prior convictions, ranging from assaulting a police officer to grand theft and battery. Since all of the evidence around the case has already been destroyed, it seems highly unlikely that the police will start looking into this case again. Number 2. This one's a little different in nature from the other entries. For the past 13 years, a woman in South Korea has been holding a 24/7 livestream in her apartment. Yeah, the livestream's literally been going for 13 years straight. In all those years, she's hardly ever left her apartment. Since nobody knows who she is, frequent viewers have nicknamed her Chip-chan. Usually the Chan honorific is used for Japanese people, but in this case, it's because she was first discovered by 4chan users. The first person to stumble across her stream actually thought she was dead, as she was laying in an extremely unnatural position, just in the corner of the camera. In fact, if you decide to check out the stream yourself by following the link in the description, you'll most likely find her passed out in the corner of the screen as well, looking completely dead to the world. She apparently sleeps for about 20 hours every day. When she is awake, she'll sometimes just start screaming. But why is she known as Chip? Well, the woman herself claims that she's being held captive by a man known only as P. According to her, P is a dirty cop that wants control of a massive amount of money she inherited. She believes that P has implanted a device known as a Verichip in her ankle, hence Chip-chan, and claims that it keeps her subservient and controls her sleep patterns, making her doze off for hours on end. Since there's no audio on the livestream, she communicates all of this to her viewers through a series of handwritten notes which she sticks to the camera. These change frequently, some of them telling us about her situation, and some just a garbled, confused mess. Obviously they're in Korean, but past examples have included things like, "Stop deceiving me, internet," and "Don't get tricked, don't get fooled. Early every morning, if someone comes that paralyzes the person, I can't be stopped." She hasn't said whether the cameras were installed by P himself as a way of keeping an eye on her, or whether she set them up around the house herself, hoping that other people might tune in and see what's happening to her. Whatever the case, when P comes by the house, the feed goes dark. This could last anywhere from a few minutes to a few hours. Most think that this man is bringing her supplies. Here are a few of the more sinister messages that she's left about her situation. "The stalker uses his skill from 2006. I have slept for 20 hours every day since then. I do not know what have happened while I sleep. I have always been afraid of sleeping. Stalker P breaks in after disabling the camera. Korean cop P makes me lose my consciousness at any time, so I always sleep on the chair for years. How can you sleep sitting on the chair every day if you don't lose your consciousness? I haven't dreamed for years cause I lose my consciousness." On top of all of this, strange things occasionally happen when Chip-chan sleeps. In this recorded footage, for instance, you can see her in bed in the right-hand side of the camera, while someone else off-screen turns her apartment lights on and off repeatedly. Now, you might be thinking that this is starting to sound like something off the Sci-Fi Channel, and some people think that the more likely explanation for Chip-chan's behavior is that she's schizophrenic and also suffers from narcolepsy. The problem with that is that she doesn't display any of the normal signs of either of those conditions. For instance, it seems unlikely that someone with schizophrenia would film themselves 24/7 due to paranoia. Also, narcoleptics fall asleep sporadically for short amounts of time, not for 20 hours straight every day. Though her own story seems rather implausible, it doesn't seem like these theories explain what's behind Chip-chan's behavior either. To this day, Chip-chan is still streaming live, and still communicating with anyone who happens to be watching. Some fear for her mental health, while others fear for her safety. Even though the reason behind all of this could easily be more tragic than creepy, it seems unlikely that we'll ever know for sure. Chip-chan actually has her own dedicated subreddit, where people post their theories and observations. I've left a link to it down below, along with a link to the livestream like I said before. If you do tune in, you'll likely see her unconscious in the corner of the screen, with a handwritten note covering much of the rest of it. Keep us updated if you see anything unusual. I'm sure we'd all be interested. Number 3. Doncaster, England, 2007. Andrew Gosden, a 14-year-old mathematical genius, left his home early on a Friday morning to catch a bus to school. The young man was a gifted student, had a 100% school attendance record, and was the kind of kid who would leave a note for his mum if he was just going around the corner of his street. Those closest to him believed he was living a happy and normal life, with no problems weighing on his mind either at home or at school. And yet, despite all of this, Andrew decided not to catch his bus that day. Instead, he walked to a nearby park and waited until 8:30 AM for his parents to leave for work. Knowing that his house was now empty, he walked back and changed out of his school uniform, threw on some jeans and a Slipknot t-shirt, put his uniform in the washing machine, and then walked out the door. He then withdrew £200 from his bank account and caught a train to London. The only thing he brought with him was his PSP, but not its charger. He didn't bring any spare clothes or anything like that, suggesting that he didn't plan on staying in the city for a prolonged period of time. But Andrew didn't return home that evening, or the next evening, or any evening after that. To this day, 10 years later, he's still missing. A campaign to find him has been going on ever since, and in London, you can still occasionally find a missing person poster with his face on it. So, what could have happened to him? Well, let's go over the facts. We know for certain that he did make it to London. 3 frames of CCTV footage surfaced a month after he disappeared, which showed him at King's Cross Station that day. The trail goes cold after that, since the footage on all nearby cameras had already been deleted. We also know that when Andrew purchased his train ticket to London, the seller informed him that a return ticket would only cost 50 pence more. Despite that, Andrew still only bought a one-way ticket. Even though some of his previous actions indicate that he planned to return home that day, this one implies that he was certain he wasn't going to. I mean, even if he was on the fence about going home that day, surely for 50p he would have just bought a return ticket. You know, just in case. Could he have planned to meet someone there then? Maybe he thought he had a ride home with them. Well, Andrew didn't own a phone, and he didn't have an email address either. Searches of his home, library and school computers turned up nothing to suggest that he planned on meeting anyone. The Thames River was thoroughly searched, in case Andrew had decided to commit suicide by jumping into it. The search turned up nothing. On top of that, the band Muse was playing in London that night, and they were one of Andrew's favourite bands. His father went to the concert to search for his son, but again, found no trace of him. Mysteriously, we also know that an unknown man turned up at Leominster Police Station, saying that he had information about Andrew's disappearance. He used the intercom, and an officer was summoned to speak with him. However, by the time the officer arrived to take details, the man was gone. One of Andrew's favourite television shows was The Fall and Rise of Reginald Perrin, in which the main character fakes his own death to start his life anew. Hoping this to be the case, his parents put money into his empty bank account, just in case he needed more. Chillingly, this money was never touched. Nobody's sure what motivated Andrew to miss school that fateful day. Why did he travel to London? Why did he clear out his bank account? And why did he do something so out of character? Who was the man at the police station claiming to know about Andrew? Is the boy alive or dead? Perhaps one day we'll have answers to all of these questions. Until then, if you happen to have any information about Andrew's disappearance, please call the Missing Children hotline on 116-000. Number 4. Most of you probably know who Mark Ruffalo is. He's a great actor, and has been in his fair share of decent films. I particularly enjoyed Zodiac and Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. What you might not have heard about is his brother's untimely death. Scott Ruffalo was found shot in the head in his Beverly Hills condo on December 1st, 2008. To start with, it was reported that he died playing a game of Russian roulette. For those who don't know, that's where you take a revolver and load it with a single bullet. Players then take it in turns to shoot the gun at their own head, hoping that the chamber is empty. Eventually, somebody paints the walls red. So, why on earth would he take part in such a suicidal game? Well, most likely he was high out of his mind. The other people at the condo with Scott were Shahar Michelle Adam and her boyfriend, Brian Schofield, both of them known drug users. Interestingly, Shahar was a descendant of the Saudi royal family, leading the papers to call her the Saudi princess. According to her, the couple only dropped by to Scott's place to pick up some keys. That's when he mentioned something about Russian roulette. While searching for the keys, she claims to have heard a gunshot. When the couple then found Scott bleeding from his head on the couch, They quickly left. That was her version of events anyway. A little over a week after Scott's death, however, the police determined that his death was a homicide. He hadn't shot himself in the head at all. The angle of the bullet made this an impossibility. Both Shahar and her boyfriend Brian became persons of interest. Despite this, neither of them were charged. The case went cold. Then, 4 years after Scott's death, Shahar, the Saudi princess, turns up dead at the age of 29. The cause of death was a suspected overdose. Since she was one of the only key witnesses, the investigation into the case pretty much died along with her. So, did the group really pull a deer hunter? Did they take it in turns, aiming the gun at each other rather than at themselves? Or was there something more malicious going on in Brian's mind, and when Shahar became a problem later down the road, he dealt with her? Who knows? Scott's death is still considered an unsolved homicide by the police. Whatever happened, his famous brother, Mark, has been able to come to terms with his loss. "You never get over it, you just get used to it," he said. "You get calloused, a little bit harder maybe, but take these tragic things and turn them into something meaningful and worthy of the loss. Make it count." Number 5. When a real-life medical case has been the basis for an episode of The X-Files, you know that something freaky's gone down. In 1994, Gloria Ramirez was rushed to Riverside General Hospital in California. She was in a state of total confusion and was suffering from the effects of advanced cervical cancer, namely tachycardia and Cheney-Stokes respiration. She needed to be sedated. The medical team injected her with diazepam, midazolam, and lorazepam, but she started reacting extremely poorly to the treatment. Something wasn't right. An unusual, oily sheen started appearing all over her body, and a fruity, garlic-like odor was coming off of her. The staff tried to defibrillate her heart, and one nurse drew some blood from her arm. The blood in the syringe smelled like ammonia, and small, white particles were floating in it. That's when the nurse that drew the blood fainted. She was swiftly removed from the room, and everyone assumed she passed out from shock. Not long after, a medical student who was examining the syringe of blood began to feel extremely nauseated. She couldn't continue, and was forced to leave the trauma room as well. Not long afterwards, she also fainted. A respiratory therapist helping to stabilize the woman passed out next. One by one, the medical team started falling like flies. All of the emergency room patients had to be evacuated from the building due to the supposedly toxic blood that had been drawn from Ramirez. A skeleton crew was left behind to try and save her life, but it was no use. After 45 minutes, she was pronounced dead. In total, 23 people became ill after breathing in the fumes from her blood, and 5 were hospitalized themselves. As a result of all of this, the late Gloria Ramirez was dubbed the Toxic Lady. So, why did the medical team react so badly to her blood? An early investigation concluded that all of the fainting was due to mass hysteria. That was refuted by the people who were affected, however. The medical resident that had passed out developed hepatitis and a vascular necrosis in her knees after coming into contact with the blood, so this whole thing couldn't have been psychological. After analyzing her body, some experts postulated that Mrs. Ramirez used DMSO, a degreasing solvent, on her skin, a sort of home remedy if you will. That could explain the sheen that developed on her skin, as well as the unusual smell. The shocks from the defibrillator could have converted the solvent into a poisonous gas. Her family, however, said that this was nonsense, and that Gloria hadn't been using the substance on her skin. When her body was released, they tried to have their own pathologist examine her, but Gloria's organs had been cross-contaminated, and her body was too badly decomposed to draw any conclusions. The DMSO theory has emerged as the agreed-upon explanation for the toxic lady case, though top medical professionals admit that even this theory has notable holes in it. It's simply the best explanation they could come up with, or at least the most scientific. Ultimately, with Gloria now buried, the exact cause of her toxicity may never be fully understood. So there you have it, 5 unresolved mysteries that I hope tickled your fancy. If you enjoyed the video, then please show your support by liking, subscribing, whatnot, and I'll be back again very soon with some more spooky stories to lull you to sleep. Until then guys, you all stay spooky. And remember, the best things happen in the dark.